Hi guys, welcome to my tutorials. Today we'll talk about views. We'll talk about what a view is. We'll talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of having views. And finally we'll create a view, and then we'll kind of go over everything, do a couple of examples, and hopefully you guys will have a decent understanding of views after this video. I expect this video to be around 5 to 10 minutes. So let's get to it. So what is a view? View is a virtual table. So it's pretty much a select query that that queries multiple tables, and then it gets saved in SQL Server as an object. So if you look to my left here, once we create a view, the view will be saved under views. It'll be visible under the views folder, and I'm using the code of .NET database. So why do we need views? Well, views provide several advantages. If you have a table that has public data and some sensitive data, with public data I mean something like a first name and a last name. And with sensitive data, I mean something like a social security number. You could go on use views to go and hide the sensitive data. And how do we do that? Well, you could go and permission the table, the table that contains sensitive data. You could go and permission that where only like an administrator can see that table. And then you could go and build a view on top of that table that only surfaces the information that's not sensitive. So that's an example of how a view can be used. Another example of views is that when we implement data warehouses, we create tables that are very granular. So it contains a lot of like detailed data, and most of the time, for the business users, this kind of data is useless. They like to go and see that the data at a higher level, at like an aggregate level. So sometimes we create these tables at a very granular level, and then create a view on top of those tables that roll up the data into something that's more user friendly, something that a business user needs. And another big advantage of views is that they can be permissioned. So we could make some users have access to views. You could deny users access to it. So that's another advantage. And a huge drawback of view is that since a view is just a select query that sits on top of a table or multiple tables, when the schema of those tables changes, the view is going to break. So we'll do an example of that as well. So that being said, let's quickly create a view and then see how they can be used. So before we create a view, I'm going to go and assume that we are implementing a system for a university, and then we are creating a table to go and store student data. So I'm going to go and create a table called a student, and then this table will have a student ID to uniquely identify a student, first name, a last name, birth date, and a social security number. We'll make this an int just to make this easier for myself. Make an identity, first name, make it Walker 100, last name another Walker, birth date, a date, and social security number would be, would this be Walker 12? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, make this a Walker 11. And make the student ID the primary key. Alright. So let's run this table, create table statement, and we have a table. So let's insert a couple of records so that it's easier to go and see what the view does. So we'll Alright, so John, make up some dummy data. And a fake social security number. And let's make another one. Alright. Jane Smith, she's going to be born in April 5th, 1980, and let's give her a different social security number. Ideally, you want to go and put a unique index here, because each social security number should be unique. But we're going to skip that for now. Okay, so we have a table, a student with 2 records right now, and we'll do a select everything from this student table. All right, so we have 2 records. We have first name, last name, birth date, and social security number. Obviously, the social security number is sensitive. So what we want to do is we want to go and create a view that sits on top of the student table that only surfaces the data that's not sensitive. So I'm going to go with birthdays, last name, and first name for that. I'm going to create a view. So we use the create view keywords to create a view, and then the schema and name of the view. So I usually try to go and put a v in front of the view, this way that I know that it's a view. I find that easier to read. So, and I'm going to copy these over. First name, last name, birth date, from. Alright, so format this thing real quick. Alright, and run. Alright, so now we have a view called student that shows only the first name, last name, and birth date. We don't have the social security number. So this is an example of how we could hide data. So now what I could do is I could go to the left here and click on properties on the student table, and then go to permissions, and I could really lock this table down, where I could lock it down so much where only the administrator can have access to it, and then we could go to the student view, which can be permissioned as well, and then we could go and give other people permissions for the view because it does not contain sensitive data. And also I said that at the very beginning that views are a select query that gets saved as an object. So if there's something in SQL called SP help text. SP help text. So if you run this and then pass in the name of the view, it'll show that this is just a select statement that gets saved as an object. Whereas if you pass in dvo.student, then the table name, then we're not going to get that. So there's no text for object dvo.student. All right, and the last part is that what are the disadvantages of having a view? Well, right now we have our view consists of first name, last name, birth date, and student. What happens if in the future somebody changes the schema and then they just decide to go and drop the student table, right? What happens now? If you drop the underlying table of the view, notice we don't get any errors. So now if you select everything from v student, then we get an error because the underlying data is missing. So that's a big drawback to views, is that when the underlying schema changes, the view just breaks. And when we drop the table, when we make those underlying changes, we don't get any errors saying that, hey, there's a view that references this data. Please don't change it. We don't get any kind of errors. So that's another disadvantage. And yeah, so that's it for today.